welcome to the 85th episode of Fruity Knitting. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Andrea, and we have an amazing treat for you today. I'm incredibly excited about this episode. We're featuring the Danish designer Christel Seyfarth. And if you could imagine how you might feel if historians suddenly found another novel by Jane Austen, or the BBC announced that they're going to do another 2 series of Downton Abbey. Well, I had that level of excitement when I first saw Christel Seyfarth's designs. Her designs are typically dramatic and complex, using very intricate and beautiful colour work, and her garments look like costume pieces. So you can imagine that I'm in heaven when I'm looking through her designs. Christel is very well known in Scandinavia, and she's also the founder of the Danish International Fair New Knitting Festival. And she was one of the judges on the popular Danish television series, The Great Knit-Off. And we cover all of these topics during our 3-part interview today. And Christel also shares some of the techniques that she's developed over the years for designing and working with colour work. So I think this is going to be an episode that many of you will want to watch at least a couple of times because it's so jam-packed with information.
Yep. As well as our feature on Christel Seyfarth, we've got updates on our own projects. We're also taking you on a short hiking adventure to the 12th century Chateau de Fleckenstein, which is in the northern Vosges Regional Nature Park, which is just across the border from Germany into France. So that's coming up later, but right now we're going to start with Bring and Brag.
So we're starting off with Bring and Brag because I've just finished a project, and it's the one I'm wearing. It's this beautiful design here called Dove by Louisa Harding, and I am thrilled with the way it fits and looks and how it's finished. And I knitted it with her beautiful yarn, which is cashmere lace. So here's a picture of the original for comparison. You can see that the colours that I've used are a lot more dramatic than the very soft, elegant colours of the original design. So the purple colour is called Lilac, and the lovely orange red is called Rowan, if you want to look those colours up. And it is 100% cashmere, and it's very fine and very beautiful. And I'm very thrilled with how it's looked because I think it's a simple, classic, striking design.
Yeah, it's always funny to hear you say that you're happy with one of your creations.
Yeah.
Because it always sort of just radiates out anyway. You can tell that you're quite happy.
Let me tell you, there are a ton of stitches in this.
Yep.
So you would want me to be happy with the finished.
Yeah.
It would be sad if I wasn't. But I'm going to give you a quick summary of the modifications that I made. And last episode, I told you that I changed the gauge. So the gauge that I knitted this design was around 30 stitches and 45 rows to 10 centimetres, which is a lot finer than the recommended gauge of 24 stitches and 36 rows. And I did this for a few reasons. It is a lace weight yarn, so I knew that if I knitted it at a finer, tighter gauge, I wouldn't lose any drape. It's still just as drapey and soft and beautiful. And the other thing is, I think that over a long time, a garment that's very fine and knitted at a fine gauge will simply last longer. It'll look better for longer, and it's less likely to stretch out of shape. And I just love the look of tiny, neat little stitches, particularly in stocking stitch. And it is a very simple design, so it was very easy for me to modify the pattern's maths to fit my gauge. So the construction, the pattern recommends that you knit it in 4 pieces. So you've got a front and a back and 2 flat sleeves, and you knit them bottom up to the armholes, and then you join them all together and you knit the yoke in the round. Well, I put in side splits in mine. You might be able to see just a little bit here because the jumper is quite long and I didn't want it to hug my tummy. So I put in the side splits and I started knitting the front and the back separately, and then at the top of the side splits, I joined them together and knitted the body in the round. And I put in 2 columns of purl stitches to act as fake side seams. And I've said this before on the show, but if you put in fake side seams, it can help prevent the body from twisting on the bias, particularly if you're knitting stocking stitch in the round. So another little detail that I've done, and I'm going to show you a picture here so you can see it up close, is there is at the bottom of the jumper there's a band of garter stitch, and I continued 3 stitches of garter stitch up on either edge of the splits, and that it looks more decorative, but it also acts to keep the fabric from curling around, and it just helps it lie flatter and neater.
That sounds very clever. It looks very cute, I think.
It does look nice, doesn't it?
Yep.
If you look closely, you have to look closely to see it.
Well, I do look closely now.
Good. You're meant to.
Yep.
So I think the challenge was to make sure with my fine row gauge that I was going to have enough length where it was needed. And so particularly on the sleeves, I just had to add, that was easy enough because I just had to add an extra couple of stripes. But I was really concerned about rearranging or recalculating the maths on the raglan part of the neck shaping, and I didn't want to disturb Louise's lovely balanced look with the stripes, the way she arranged it. The way she arranged it, I thought it just looked absolutely perfect, and I wanted to keep that. But it was actually much easier than I anticipated. So what I did is, once I joined the sleeves and the body together, I added about 5 or 6 extra rows in the lilac before I started with the stripes. And then you might notice that I added 1 extra row to the bottom 4 orange stripes. So you might see that they're just faintly wider than the top ones. And then I think I played around a little bit, changed some of the decreases up here so that it fitted. But I think it looks great. I think it really fits me well.
Yep.
And it's fine. So
Yep.
I'm totally happy with that. And it's a typical Louisa design in that it's simple, elegant, and feminine and classic. So if you haven't knit any of her designs before, they're very easy and they fit very well, and they're very feminine and elegant, if that's your aesthetic. It's my aesthetic. So I'm thrilled.
Just a quick update from me in under construction. This is my Celine cardigan by Michelle Wong, designer. I'm knitting it for our daughter Madeline, and I'm using a John Arbon yarn. We actually spoke to John Arbon in episode 79. You interviewed him, and it's really worth having a look because he has an enormous amount of information, knowledge that he shares on yarn construction. So check that out. Many of you will know that around here, Andrea is really the hare and I'm more the tortoise, going slowly and steadily with my progress, but I have got some progress to show here. As you can see, the back is all complete with the armhole shaping, the shoulder shaping, all beautiful, and we've also got the right front also completed and seamed up. So that's all good. The next challenge actually comes after that because this is my left front, and you'll see the left front is slightly different. All of the knitting I've done so far is with the cables going from the bottom left to the top right. And that's actually relatively easy. On this side, so that you've got the cables all heading upwards towards the button band, these ones go in this direction. On the left front, they go in the opposite direction. So what does that mean? From the bottom right to the top left.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a trivial thing, but it turns out that knitting those cable crossovers is quite different and it's more difficult. So we actually did some time trials.
Well, first of all, you tell them why it's difficult. And the pattern says that this side...
Yeah, so for this side, you're meant to use 1 cable needle. You can easily do it with 1 cable needle. The pattern says for the left front it's the left front, use 2 cable needles. Now, Andrea's actually showed me how to do it with 1 cable needle, but it's still pretty tricky for an apprentice like me.
For a tortoise.
For a tortoise, yeah, it's pretty tricky knitting. So we did some time trials, and my timing on this row, the cable row crossover, takes about 15 minutes on the right-hand side. For the left-hand side, I think we're looking at about 30 minutes. Although I have to say, part of that timing, it's pretty stressful. And so part of the timing, I think it's 20 minutes knitting and then 10 minutes lie down.
I think he takes the excuse. He does the cable and then he puts his feet up and decides to have a little rest.
It's survival. But listen, there's one other thing that I have to say. I am a master at rib.
2x2 rib.
2x2 rib. Got it down pat. I'm confident that I could even handle a 1x1 rib. Because that's a lot of practice on ribbing here.
Hopefully by the next episode you'll see this side finished completely and sewn up, hold it there.
Yep.
And at least a sleeve done.
But we'll have at least 2 sleeves. I'm going to
by next episode.
Totally. I'll be doing these sleeves in my sleep.
I'd watch what you promise.
Yeah.
Knitting, we have an exceptional guest today. She's the Danish knitwear designer Christel Seyfarth. Christel is very well known, particularly in Scandinavia, for her completely stunning and unique colourwork designs. She's also the founder of the very successful Scandinavian Fair No Knitting Festival, and she was one of the judges on the Danish television series The Great Knit Off. So there's so many exciting topics here for us to talk about today. I'm actually a little bit overwhelmed, so we'll get straight into it. A huge welcome to you, Christel. Thank you so much for being on Fruity Knitting.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited about it. So I think this is going to be just great.
Good. Okay, so you grew up on the Danish island of Fanø and you're still living there with your extended family. And the landscape and the cultural history of the island seems to be at the core of your creativity, so therefore a lot of your work. Can you describe to us what the landscape looks like and say something about the cultural history of the island and tell us why it's so important to you?
Well, if you picture a long, narrow island where half of it is divided just into beach and the other part is dunes, and behind the dunes you will find small villages with cobblestone streets and thatch roofs. That's where I live and that's where I'm born. My family goes all the way back to 1641. Most of them were sailors, and I'm brought up on an island, the westernmost island of Denmark, where we are used to rough weather, terrific weather, and all kinds of storms and high waters and dramatic in all sense.
And what about the sailing culture? Because there was a lot of sailors came out of that island, didn't they? And travelled around the seas and brought back a lot of exotic things. So,
first of all, living in a sailor's family, I've been used to since I was a child that the sailors were never at home and the women were alone with the children. This is sort of how it, there was nothing unusual in that. So, but the thing is that even though we're such a small island, the sailors had a very large perspective, and so did the wives, because often the wives went out sailing with the husbands, and so did the children. And they brought back all kinds of interesting treasures. For instance, silk from China to our customs here on the island. So we were drinking of fine China, and we had all kinds of fun treasures in our homes, which was quite unusual just a few kilometers away on the mainland. So in that sense, we always had the outlook, to the big world, and we were never looking back at the mainland of Denmark, really. And it's like that today also, actually.
So would you say the colours of the sort of exotic oriental was what influenced the island more than what was going on in Denmark, mainland Denmark?
Well, absolutely. The sailors, they were often gone for 3 or 4 years, and when they came back home, they brought all these treasures. And since we were wearing costumes, and also fine costumes for festivities, all the silks from China and the scarves from India and wherever all over the world, they found something for the costume. The women would sew new costumes, and therefore they would look very exotic compared to what people looked like on the mainland. So there was always something like, they were talking about, where have you been? Well, I just came home from Australia or from America or from Africa, whatever. So they had this very big perspective, which was quite unusual for this time.
So how about your childhood crafting experiences? How important was knitting and crafting in your family, and what kinds of things were you knitting as a child?
An interesting thing is that my father was knitting. He was a sailor. Many sailors knitted because they have long shifts, so they were knitting on the ships. So, but I was taught to knit by my grandmother when I was 5 years old. Everyone can knit, really, but with the same as many other things, that you might like to do it or you don't do it. So it was not a custom in my family that anyone was knitting. Actually, my grandmother, she taught me just to cast on and knit back and forth. And from then on, I picked it up from friends or from other older ladies or from other knitters. I wasn't really taught anything further from my own home. They didn't have much interest in knitting. And my father, of course, he could knit socks and all that, but he wouldn't knit anything like I'm doing today. So, but I picked it up really fast, and within short time, I produced more than I could use myself. So I sold my designs. That could be, at that point, I was only knitting stripes. I always color, but not patterns as I do today. So I was knitting stripes and big coats and vests and socks and sweaters and everything that came to my mind, and sold it to friends and family. So I started being an entrepreneur when I was quite young in knitting.
That's really interesting. And then you actually left the island when you were 16, and you spent some time in Canada, and you traveled around. How did like leaving the island and your first impressions of living abroad, how did that affect you in your designing?
When I was 16, I became exchange student in the States, first of all. It was later that I went to Canada. But I remember when I was 16, and I came to America living with a wonderful Jewish family. They were quite interested and quite stunned, really, that I could knit. And they called me the world's fastest knitter, actually. And I didn't know anyone in America who could knit at all. But the other exchange students from Europe, they were knitting, so I was knitting with them. But the perspective that I got from being abroad was that I suddenly looked at my little island, the tiny island that I came from, and the sailors and the family life that we had. And I suddenly realized that this was a lot more special than I actually had thought it was. So for the rest of my life until then, or until today, I look at my island and the things I do from the American perspective, if you know what I mean, from abroad, like if I was a tourist looking at the place. And that has helped me in many ways. I found the highlights of what people were interested in and what they were taken by. And I have been working with that ever since.
And I'm sure that's what's helped the Fainu Festival become really successful, but we'll talk about that later. So that's interesting for you to say that. Now, I'd like to talk about magic balls, because I know that you work with them a lot in your designs. And just for the viewers who don't know magic balls, it's another method that a knitter can use to help them create new colorways. And you do that by rolling up two balls of color, each from contrasting color groups, and one's used for the background and the other one's used for the foreground patterning. So Christel, can you first of all say something about the yarns that you use, because you've got beautiful yarns and there's I think about 120 different colours. So first of all, tell us about your yarns, and then show us how you create these magic balls and give us some tips so that we can learn to do them well. And then finally, show us some of the designs, particularly your shawls, that use this method.
I only work with one quality of yarn, and that is a wool which is colored in loose stock, and then it's blended together for the final color. And what I love about my colors and my yarn is that these are melange colors, and they work perfect with the way I want to knit and the way I want to paint with the wool. I have 124 colors, and I could use 100 more for sure. They're all lovely. When I want to, when I'm doing a project, I like to have at least six colors, I would say, for the background, and the same for the pattern colors. That is, if you have less than that, it would just look like stripes too much. So how do I do that? Well, I don't like my knitting to be too mathematical, if you understand what I mean. That is, start the same place and end the same place and just do the repetitions, just the same all the way through the work. I want things to be more playful. So that's why I make the magic balls. Actually, that was the only thing that my grandmother, she knew how to do, because we did not have much wool at that time. So she taught me this. So let's have a look at it. For instance, I would like the background to be green. So I have picked various green colors here. And they go from very light to medium to dark. This colorway that I have made here can be blended in many ways, but if I would do it like I just said, from light to medium and to dark, I would probably place the colors like this. So you can see how they get darker and darker. Now I want to make a ball. And the most important thing is that you choose the right colors first. When you make the ball, and you have to make various sizes of each color, you never regard where you are. For instance, on a shawl, somebody say to me, well, when you are at the tip, you make shorter rows, and when you are up and have more stitches, you will make bigger or have longer pieces of wool. That's not the case. I want everything to be pretty random, in the sense that when I start knitting, I just follow what I decided, and I will not change anything. So what I do is, I will start with the lightest color and make a new ball. I roll up 3 to 13, 14, 15 meters. I don't count, I don't measure, I just roll until I think this is enough. I take the next color. I don't do anything to the ends. When I do the ball, just roll. It takes you about 5 minutes or even less to make a ball. Okay, you see, I don't measure anything. It's like a feeling of this is enough. I don't more of that color. And this is actually alpaca wool. I have a few colors which are not the Scottish wool that I usually do, because the colors are just so wonderful in this alpaca. And it's a bit thicker, but it doesn't matter. You know, the thickness has to be more or less the same for the ball. But if you have a favorite color which is a bit thicker or a bit thinner, it doesn't matter. You can use it, but not for just for small stripes, or so you don't see there is a difference. So I just keep rolling like this until I have been through all the colors. But one thing is that one may feel, I usually say there are knitters who are mathematical knitters. These are the ones who like to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that, but this is not what we are going to do here, because this works fine anyway. So I might take color 1, 2, 3. I may go back to color 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, and 5, 6, and I will jump in between the colors, especially if they have sort of the same color scale. I would never use these two after each other. That's too big a transition in color. So it has to blend nicely. So if I have rolled up all these colors and I end up with the darkest one, I will do the opposite, going back, hopping back and forth. So I end up with a bigger ball. I usually make a ball the size of a tennis ball. And that's enough to start with. And again, remember, don't do anything to the ends. Then again, I would need another colorway, of course, for the pattern. So that could be all these lovely rose colors here. I only have 4, but this is the easiest way, so to speak, in regards to how to pick colors, because it's tempting to say, okay, I will have pattern colors, they all must be rose or red or whatever, and then I just pick 8 reds or 8 rose colors. But the thing is, if you want to make something quite interesting, that is, you can add like a bit of orange to it, which makes it all look so much nicer.
Yeah.
Or like this, it really lightens up everything. So that definitely would be a color range that I would love to work with. And I can show you also, if we take the green ones again, which are just green. I I might add a little turquoise instead,
Yeah.
which makes it look a lot nicer. Or I can stay with those, but also I could make it a little more yellow if I wanted to do that. So it's actually a matter of being brave enough to do something with the colors that you usually don't do. I would also use a pink after an orange and a red, and that is just that little color, little splash of color that makes everything looks so much more alive. You could also I keep jumping back and forth because I get new ideas. But you could also add the purple to some of this, So play with it and do something that you would normally never do. Try something new, and you would see how wonderful it really looks. You will get amazed that after a while that you get so much experience in blending the colors that you can do variations which you would never think that you would do before you started up. So again, this is a ball with all kinds of beautiful turquoise colors. Make a ball like this size. If you make it a little bigger and you go on holiday, that will last for a week, which is very practical. You don't have to bring all the colors. Make 2 big balls, background color, pattern color, your knitting needles, then you're set for a week, which I think is great.
How exciting. And and then you just knit any patterns that you might be inspired to on your holiday, and you've got a really organic, beautiful piece that represents your holiday.
Absolutely, and what mood you're in. It's just a matter of, you can add up to 50 colors if you like, and you can keep all your stashes. There's very small pieces, very, very, very small pieces like this you will save. What I have at home in my studio, I have baskets with light turquoise color, darker turquoise or blue, and rose baskets and all. So when I get an idea and about a colorway, I pull out the baskets, pull out all the wool on the table, and I look at it and I pick from all the colors. And even though I just have so little, I will add it to a sweater. I don't care if I don't have enough for the sleeves and that, because it's blended with all the other colors. So that's, a sweater from your baby or for your husband.
Yes.
You're putting lots of memories into, you can use for a new project. So I'm sorry to say to all the knitters who like to buy yarn, you have to save these small pieces now, and don't go out and buy new things. These small pieces are actually the most interesting pieces when you start knitting, because they just sort of add something extra to it when you just have a little color splash here and here. So, but there's another thing I know that everyone asks me, what do you do about the ends when you do the ball and you haven't done anything to the ends? What I like to do is that I do, I think you call it weaver's knot or reef knot. That is when I have knitted with my ball and I have finished this color, and I have to take the new one. Let me see if I can find it. It's here. Yes. I take this one, the end of this one here, and I do the reef knot. Oops, like this. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but most people
I can see
know.
it. Yep.
Can you see it? Yes. And you pull it, and no longer ends like these. They might even be a little long. So what I do, and this is something that you don't want to do in public, but it's quite practical. I moisten the ends until I can feel that they are moistened enough. So now they look like this. So I rub them between my hands until they felt. And this you can, of course, just do with wool that felts. Yeah. And here is the transition.
That's great. That's so practical.
For all the designs that I do, I never sew in ends. And I usually say that life is too short for sewing in ends and to doing knit back rows. So I try to live by that. So this is quite easy. It takes 2 seconds. Boop, you're on and can continue just with a new color in your ball.
Welcome back. So in part 2 of our interview with Christel, she's going to show you some of her shore designs where she uses those magic balls she's just shown you how to make, as well as some of her exquisite coat and jacket designs. But firstly, I'm going to give you a very quick update on my crochet project, which is this Bohemian Blooms blanket by Janie Crow. So here's a picture of it in all of its stunning glory. The design is inspired by English artists and English country gardens, and it gets progressively more complicated as you work your way through the 42 pieces. So it's a long-term project for me, and I started out as a beginner crocheter, and when I finish, I'm not going to call myself a beginner crocheter.
You'll be a grand master.
I wouldn't go that far, but
A Jedi.
no, I think I'll just hopefully call myself a very successful crocheter.
Right.
That'll be fine. So there is 42 pieces, but there's 9 types of designs within the blanket. And so just to give you an update, I have done 4 border stripes. They're quite long, and there they are there. I've done 8 little corner squares. Lots of different little techniques done in that. I've done 3 of these rectangles, which have got bobbles and beading and a few other kinds of stitches there. So
This is like the very hungry caterpillar, isn't it?
yeah, yes,
What's coming up
increasingly
next?
eats more and more.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've actually noticed that this one doesn't have edging on it yet. I've got to do another one of those. But this week I decided that I would try one of the fancy flower patterns. And so I've finished one of them, and this one's called Harmony. It's very, very pretty. It looks like a little water lily. So there is a lot of intricate layered stitches going on here. So I thought I'll show you a picture up close so you can see what I've done. And what you do is you start with a little white flower that's got a gold center, and when you've done that, you keep the right side of the flower facing you, and you pull down the petals, whoopsie, like that, and then you work the layer of pink, dark pink behind it, and then you work the layer of dark green behind that, and all the while you've got these little gaps so that you can later on attach the layer of light pink petals, which makes it look like a lily. So you can see it there, and that's what it looks like on the background. And then you've got treble stitches in this lovely camel colour. You've got back post stitches in the dark pink there, more treble stitches, and then to make the circle into a square, you've got this lovely lace mesh in grey. And finally you put the bright blue surface stitch around. So there's quite a few little stitches in there, but I'm feeling more confident with them. And I just think, this took me about an evening to do. So you could do one of these in an evening or less. And I think they're just great even just by themselves. They're so pretty, and I can see a lot of different uses for them. For instance, you could sew this onto a handbag, and I think it would just look really, really pretty.
Yep.
You could also, if you've got a very special gift, like a wedding gift or a special anniversary gift, you could attach it to the paper, up to the wrapping, and present the gift like that. Or you could also do a couple of them and put them in the center as a centerpiece on a table for a wedding, for a dinner party. So I'm getting excited with crochet. I think there's a lot of different uses for it,
Yep.
particularly in the home decor.
Yep. That's great, dolls. In the last episode, we mentioned that we were taking a week's break to spend some time with our daughter Madeline, who is home with us for her university holidays. We went to an Airbnb in Alsace, which is about just over 2 hours drive from here, just across the border from Germany into France. It was really beautiful. We're in the middle of the woods, very peaceful, very hot it was. We did have to do some work, all of us actually. Madeline has to prepare for some exams still, and the two of us were doing work on the show. So we were all sitting there on the balcony. I thought it was great. 3 of us on the balcony with our laptops. But we did take some time to get out, and we've got some stunning footage of this spectacular 12th century castle ruins coming up for you very shortly.
Yeah.
The music that Andrea has put with this is from Vivaldi's Four Seasons, which we have used on the show before. The Four Seasons is a set of 4 violin concertos, and actually each of the concertos, well, there's one for each season, of course, and each of the concertos actually has a sonnet that goes with it. I never knew about that. The piece of music that we're using in this footage, or with this footage, is from the 4th concerto, so it's Winter, and it's the final movement, so the Allegro. And the sonnet that goes with it talks about, it's in winter, so it's talking about walking on an icy path.
Very cautiously.
Carefully, because it's slippery, and there's occasions where you fall down, and it also talks about walking across a frozen lake where you're concerned about the ice breaking, and so you're kind of wanting to go fast, but you also need to go gently.
So that you don't fall through in the icy water.
So you can hear all of this in the music, which is really good to listen to. But the funny thing here is that this was last week that we were there, so it was actually pretty hot. So it was about 30 degrees or 90 degrees Fahrenheit, pretty warm. So that doesn't quite match perfectly, but it's exquisite music and really stunning scenery, so we're sure you're going to love it.
We would really like to ask our viewers to please support the show by becoming a patron. There's 2 of us working full-time on this show right now. It's not a hobby. We're both working very much full-time, and we're putting in a tremendous amount of effort to bring you on a regular basis a really high-quality knitting content show. And all of our financial support only comes through patrons. We don't receive support from sponsorship or advertising. And many of our viewers, our long-term viewers, have not become patrons, but we do believe that most viewers can afford the price of a coffee on a monthly basis to keep the show going and to support the show. So we want to encourage you, please take that effort to go to the Patreon page and sign up as a patron. It's a very safe and flexible system. And of course, we absolutely need to thank our very wonderful and completely generous patrons for making this show available so far.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you also from my side. We really appreciate the support that has got us this far.
Okay, well, I will show you some of my shawl designs so you can see what I mean. This one here, you can see how I used very pastel background colors. They're blue, but I also added some mustard color to it just to give it a little more color splash.
Yeah.
And actually this one here, this is something new that I have started on doing, that I like to embroider on the shawls or on a jacket also. The way of knitting with two balls actually has a limitation that you can just knit with these two colors. So if you want to add an extra color, you don't like to knit with three colors, that's too much work. So I like to embroider instead. So this one here has been embroidered, all the stalks have been embroidered. I continue with the borderline here. This is a very big shawl. And then I like to do sort of a fold down edge. So when I wear my shawl, I can fold down the edge and there is another combination of the color on the other side.
That's beautiful.
So this is, this is quite, there are many ways that you can add something interesting to your designs. I could also have chosen to have another pattern in here if I wanted to, and even another colorway, which I sometimes do with my jackets, but I'll show you that later. So this was my beach shawl. Here's one. I have picked all the colors randomly for both background and pattern. So it's hard to see what is pattern background and what is pattern colors. So my inspiration was from a very old faded piece of cloth, and I thought I would try to see if I could do something similar. So this is just, I think I have about 25 colors in this one here. So this is a very busy piece. So in order to frame it in, I put on a striped border, but I like to add more blue colors to it, so it looks like it's alive in some way. It gets lighter, as you see. It's very dark here, and then it gets. I think that looks really terrific. And then I just haven't done anything to the other side, because when you wear the shawl, you might want to fold this one down, and I still think it should be framed in and not too busy. So I have just kept it from both sides, but I always do two sides to the border, and I also do lots of inside facings. I love to do actually all the finishing, which is one of my favorites. There are some people who think, what, you like to do finishing? I love to do finishing. And this one here is also another piece. It's a shawl with big poppies on in various sizes, so I have drawn a very, very big diagram, which just creates a very big sofa when you're knitting it, but eventually you will get through it. You see, it's the poppies are all over the place. And I have embroidered all the stalks in green, because and the black points inside them, because I did not want to carry a third color with me. What I did not mention really was that all my designs are knitted in the round and cut up with steeks, and so are the shawls as well. So I just do stockinette stitches all the time, and I have the pattern in front of me, which is so much easier when you have those more or less complicated diagrams to read and patterns to follow. Just one, may I just show you just definitely. One last one? The shawls that I just showed you, they all have background colors and pattern colors rolled up the way that I showed you with the magic ball. But I also like to sometimes to keep them a bit more, well, not as busy. So here I have decided I wanted just a solid background color. Instead, I played a little with the colors in the patterning here, the flowers, and then just not to make it too boring, I made a border like this.
Oh, that's lovely as well.
So
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I've got a question. On some of your designs, like the poppies, there's quite a big gap between each poppy. You don't do that in Intarsia. You carry the yarn behind, don't you?
Yes, I do. And that's another reason why it's practical to knit in the round with steeking. I knit both. I knit Fair Isle technique, which is lovely and the best technique I ever learned. So that makes it possible for me to have these very big gaps between, for instance, the two flowers. And it looks nice on the back. Normally, if you don't do the Fair Isle, you will have a very long strand on the back of your work, which after a while carrying it, wearing it a few times, then you got your rings into it and everything. So this is a great technique which I can only recommend everyone to learn right away. You love it. Doesn't have to be more complicated things like mine that it will be useful for, but any kind of color work. It's just a great technique. And it has also the advantage that it keeps your knitting a lot more firm, because you have, if I just may show you from the back, you see how it looks on the back. Very, very short. They've been woven in the color you're not working with, which gives you a very, very nice backside of your project. And it stays nice forever. It doesn't go out of shape, and you don't get your fingers and rings and bracelets into it as well. So that's a wonderful technique.
So are they being woven in every 2 stitches?
I do every 2, 3, 4, but not more than 4 stitches.
Yeah,
It
that's what I
depends
do too.
It looks terrific. The shorter, the less stitches you have between the weaving in, the better the backside looks.
Yes.
But 2, 3, or 4 is fine.
Yeah. Okay. So now you've also written that you have a real passion for old costumes, from simply cut Eastern clothes to richly decorated Rococo costumes with birds, flowers and leaves. And you do have some very uniquely shaped jacket and coat designs. Can we see some of those? And can you talk in more detail about this inspiration source?
I love to look in costume books. Actually, I have a lot more costume books than I have knitting books. When I look in the books, I look at shapes. How are they put together? How is the patterning? How did they use colors? And especially for the very ancient costumes, which I love to look at, because they are very easily cut in squares and in triangles and put together to give shape to the design. And that has inspired me to do the Turkish coat, which you see here behind me. This is knitted in 11 panels, and each panel has its own patterning. Here in the front, you see the border. Here is a panel with stripes. Here is the front panel. Two side panels. The back piece panel. And then again. I told you before I like to add something to the finishing. So instead of, you see, this is what it will look like when it is closed. But I like to have something here inside also. So you can either wear it like this, or when you wear it loose and you move, you will see there's something inside, which I think is very intriguing. Also, I have a patterning up here.
Ah, that's gorgeous.
This is actually a true copy of an original Turkish coat, which has never ever been knitted before. And I love this way of putting panels and shaping the coat so much that I actually think that more people should look into it, because you can start with just the front panels and add extra panels. No matter what size you are, if you're tiny or if you're bigger, you just keep adding more and more panels, and it just looks more and more interesting the more that you add to it. And since this has also been knitted in the round and cut up, I have all the stitches here, the cut stitches here. So what I do is I add just a long stripe of knitting here and sew it around the stitches so that they don't run and so that it looks nicer. So here again you can play with stripes on this extra border here, or you can do all kinds of things. I also did this pin tuck here on the coat, and I done pin tucks here on the sleeves just to add an extra color. I could have added one of the other colors actually just for binding off here, but I decided that I wanted to give it just an extra splash of color. So this is my Turkish coat. And again, it's knitted with all kinds of blue and blueberry and dark blue and dark gray in the background and all kinds of pink colors for the patterning.
But they're still very subtle changes, so it doesn't look too stripy at all, does it? Yeah,
the trick is about the stripes, because of course it is stripes. If you have to have like 8-10 rows of each color. Sometimes you can take 3 or 4, but as a general rule, it's better that the stripes are wider than they are too small. It looks very busy if you have too many stripes of just 1 or 2 rows. It looks very busy unless the colors are very, very close to each other. So it has to be 8-10 rows of each color. Then it looks really, really nice.
Yeah, okay.
The next one that I'd like to show you is a more fitted design. That's my Rococo coat, which you see here. This has also been knitted in the round and cut open, but more than just one place. I had to cut it up in one place in order to continue, knit a little back and forth, and then I continued with stick stitches in the round. I always try to figure out how I can knit everything in the round. I don't like to do the back rows, so I figure out how to avoid it. There are exceptions where I have to do back rows, and that is could be on the inside facings, which cannot be knitted in the round because I don't want too many stick stitches all over the place that I have to hide with new stripes. So sometimes I have to suffer a little and I knit back rows. But this one here also has sort of a lining and inside, which has really, some would say that's a lot of work for, do you see that? But you do see that. When you wear a coat like this, it will flip up like this, and other than looking like the Fair Isle knitting in the back, you look at something else. And so I started with a very long border here, and this piece of the coat, knitted in the round, cut it up, and I have inside also to make it being more stable. I have knitted a waistband to keep it in place. And here you will see the inside facing of the body itself, which is quite a wide piece of facing, but it adds to it gives you such a nice fit, and it stays like that forever and doesn't get loose and bigger and gross. So that's a good point. And again, you can play with another colorway in the back. The sleeves here, they are knitted double all the way up to here. I don't know why I did that. That's probably not necessary, but I thought that would be nice.
It does give you a difference in the quality of the material, because where you've done it double, it's really much more stiffer, which is good. And then you've got the flowing sleeves, and on the skirt, which is sort of like a contrast. So it's sort of like a bit of a sewing thing, isn't it?
That's exactly what it is, Andrea. I like to sew, or I used to sew a lot when I was younger, and I do the same techniques. Also, I like to when you have the pattern for sewing designs. I don't know what you call it, but I think I look at the patterns, the paper patterns.
Yes.
And I measure and just see, how is this done? How can I get that color right? Oh, and then I look at the pattern there, see, okay, I have to knit like this. So I look a lot on things that have been sewn to get ideas of the shaping. Actually, why I think it's worth doing that extra work with the lining, that is, this one, a piece like this takes you perhaps 200-300 hours to knit, and you want that piece to last for many, many years. And it's the same with the sewing designs. You also see the lining. They put lining inside in order to make it last many years. So it's exactly the same with knitting. And here you have the opportunity to play with other design or other patterning for the lining, which I think adds an extra thing to it, really makes it look just a little better.
I agree. I think it's stunning. And also with the swing of the skirt, you definitely will see that lining. So it's good that it is so wide.
Yes, it is. So this is one of my favorites. It takes a woman to carry that one.
Yeah.
But here in Scandinavia, there are many brave women who are wearing. So I have another design that I'd like to show you. This is my Morningstar bridal jacket. And this is inspired by the bride jacket here on the island, on the southern part of the island. We have 2 towns on the island, and the dresses and costumes are the same, but there are small differences. So the bridal jacket from Sunderho, which is the one that I made here, has an insert here, which is just a square sewn to the side here. But when it has a very tight fit, so when I put it on and I close all the buttons, and I don't have anything here in front, it will widen up and show this piece of insert. This is how, of course, I have interpreted it a little different than the original one. The bodies here, for instance, would look a little different on the original. But this is, that's a right I have as a designer, just to make my own stuff out of it. Yeah. So I have a body in one patterning, and then I've chosen to make the sleeves in another one. But just 3 colors for this one. So it looks it's not busy, but something is happening on it anyway. And I love the small pin tucks here at the neckline, just to add a little extra to it, and also here at the waist. So I love to look at the costumes here on the island. I actually have more costumes myself, and so do my girls. And they are so lovely, even especially the old ones. They have embroidered bands in the front and on the sleeves, and the scarves are beautiful. So there are lots of ideas to get from just looking at the colorways. I find that looking at old costumes, you will find the most amazing color combinations that you would never think of. So if you are not very familiar with choosing your own colors, you should have a look there and get some very, very good ideas. So you can put colors together that you never thought you could. So that's why I love to look in costume books and look at costumes, how they're put together.
That is completely stunning. I love that one, and I love those colors. They're very antique looking, actually, aren't they? They're soft and beautiful. Yeah, that's exciting. And down the bottom, you've knitted the peplum, the little frill at the bottom. That's flat, isn't it?
Yes.
And then you would have done.
It's flat knitted. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's great.
There's a small dots here. Yes. Yeah.
So talking about costumes, I have seen on YouTube a few little clips about the Fenu festival, and I've seen that you do, or there are sometimes people dressing up in the Danish costumes there, and they look really gorgeous. So I want to get onto that. You and your husband are the founders of the Fenu Knitting Festival, and it's now in its 14th year, and it's held every year in late September. So just describe the festival to us. What would an international visitor expect to find?
When visitors come to Faino for the Knitting Festival, they will experience everything that they could dream of when it comes to wool, patterns, designers, fashion shows, workshops, lectures, and all that. The base program of any festival, we offer that. But then we have decided long time ago that this should be not an ordinary knitting festival, but a special one. So what we do is we include our own cultural life and traditions here on the island. That is that they will meet lots of women wearing the costumes. We show them how they dance. We play the music. We invite them into our homes, into all the museums are part of the knitting festivals. We have guided tours around the small towns. We have the sailing boats out. We have other boats, motorboats going out. We have so many things going on besides music, which is one of the very big things also. There's music all the time. If you come here, you will get really high on wool. That we can promise for sure, because we have stalls and the marketplace is really amazing. But not everyone is coming alone. They might bring their husbands and families and grandchildren and grandparents, whatever. And they live in summer houses here on the island while the knitter, she visits the place. But over the years, we want to include everyone. So we have also in our brewery, actually here on the island, we have 2 evening events with music and beer tasting of our own local beer. So that is quite popular. And on Sunday, we have a meditation service at the church where our local priest, she will speak about mindfulness and things you can relax with. And you are
that sounds great.
That's so fun. And you are allowed to knit during the service. And I usually say that's on Sunday. That's when all the knitters come for forgiveness because they have really spent too much money during the weekend. So they all look very, but they love it. And it's so nice. Everything is about meditation, and you call knitting our times yoga, and whatever you can find expressions to put on knitting, but it does something special to you. And if you have been all excited the entire weekend with all the things that you have seen and inspiration, it's very nice just to sit down at the church, knit slowly, and then have somebody very wise, our priest, tell you something about life. And that's what we do. So there are so many events during the weekend. And since the festival is divided into 2 towns, the biggest part of the festival is here in the northern part where I live, and then we have a small branch of the festival in the southern part, and that's where so you get actually a round trip on the island on the beach, and you get from one town to the other one, and you see all kinds of things, and you can go to the museums as well. We have exhibitions there, knitwear designers exhibit there, and we have all kinds of things. Actually, there's so much to do here that many knitters, they come the week before, the Saturday before we start, and some stay even the week after. As they say, we have bought so much. So it is terrible to come back home, start work on Monday, and you have all those big baskets full of new projects, and you cannot start. So we have knitting guests here for 2 weeks, which is wonderful.
It sounds fantastic. Well, I'm actually planning to come in 2020, so that I'm really excited about that.
You're so welcome. We have 15-year anniversary next year, so it will be even bigger.
Great. Well, we'll be there.
Great, wonderful.
Welcome back again. So in part 3 of our interview with Christel, which you're going to see very, very shortly, Christel tells us what it was like for her behind the scenes to be one of the judges on the television series The Great Knit-Off. For me, I found this part of the interview particularly fascinating and fun. I think you're going to love it. It's really fun to hear what goes on. Yeah. But first of all, wasn't that great to see her beautiful shawl designs and her exquisite jackets and coats? And I wanted to show you very quickly this book, which is by her. It's called Fair New Strik. And in a future episode, I'm going to talk more about the book in a lot more detail. But because you've just heard her say that she has a great love of costumes, I thought I should mention the book now. And so the book is filled with really beautiful pictures and stories of Fair New's cultural history, and the designs in the book are inspired by the traditional island costumes. And you can see on the cover, we've got a picture of the Morning Star bridal jacket that she's just shown us. Now, I've just finished a project, and you're probably wondering, or some of you are probably wondering, what project am I going to do next? Now, you must have realised that I couldn't pass up a costume if one came my way. So this is going to be my next project, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm going to do it in Christel's lamb's wool yarn that she's just shown you. And here are actually I've got 3 colours here. Here are the colours that I'm using, and I think they look even more beautiful in real life than they do in the picture. They look like even more my colours. This dark blue is actually just a really deep teal colour, which is really beautiful. And what looks like a pale blue is actually a fresh turquoise colour, which I think is stunning. And I absolutely adore this old gold colour. So I think the 3 together are really beautiful. I'm looking forward to knitting this design because it's got a lot of interesting details that are going to keep me entertained, I think. So I started swatching. And the design, most of it is done in the round. So I need to do a swatch that's going to imitate knitting in the round. So that means not swatching back and forward with pearl rows. So what I did was just knit across and then shuffle my stitches to the other end and bring the yarn behind the work and start knitting again. So I'm only ever knitting on the right side rows. You can see the strands of yarn hanging there behind. Now, what's exciting about this is that I've got the gauge easily, and more importantly, I really like the recommended gauge's fabric, because that's what I always go for. I go for a fabric that I like best, and then I arrange the pattern for my gauge. I don't have to do that, which is fantastic, because I really like her gauge. I like the fabric it produces. So that's that.
That's incredible, Dal.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever experienced that before.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Either that or I'm just getting to be a tighter and tighter knitter, I think. Because I'm always changing down to a finer gauge.
Yeah, but you're always making it tighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this matches. Anyway. Christel is kindly offering Fruity Knitting patrons a discount on all the kits and yarn in her online store. You've just seen some of her shawls, jackets and coats. They all come as kits in various different colours. She also has lots of sweater, cardigan and accessory designs, as well as designs for children and men. That's it for us today.
Yes, thank you for your company. It's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Yep, thanks for being with us. Part 3 of the interview is coming up right now, as Andrea said. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, now I am really excited to ask you about your role in the Danish television series The Great Knit-Off. And for the viewers who don't know about this series, it was a very successful television series that was inspired by the English series The Great Bake-Off. But instead of baking, it was a knitting competition. So, Christel, you were one of the judges, but you were also responsible for organising the whole content of all of the competitions in the 3 series. So there's so much here that we could actually talk about. Let's just start by you telling us how the program actually got started, whose idea it was, and how did it sort of come into being. And then for the viewers who haven't seen it, just give a quick description of the skill level of the competitors, the kinds of projects that they were given, and also the things that you were judging them on.
I was approached by a Danish TV channel who asked me my thoughts about doing something equal to the Great Bake Off, just with knitting. They have been watching the Fanø International Knitting Festivals for quite a number of years, also been covering it for us. And they thought it would be fun to do that, but they actually needed someone to say, yes, we can do that or not. So they came to me and I immediately thought it was a fabulous idea. So they asked me to be one of the judges, one of two judges. And we started, they first actually started looking for participants. And what they were looking for was a range of age and also skills. They did not have to be very skilled, but creative was also just as good. And somebody had been knitting for 50 years and someone had been knitting for 3 years, but they all felt confident that they had something to offer for the show. My fellow judge and myself, we discussed the projects that we were going to have and how difficult they should be, and the progress from program 1 up till the final program. How difficult should the projects be, and also we had to consider, which is something knitters never do, how long does it take to knit a sock, a sweater, or something else. We just do it and we don't count the hours. So we had to be pretty certain about how much time we could offer, because we were working with programs of 1 hour and 3 hours and 6 hours. So when we finally got everything together, we were doing the programs at a very beautiful little castle in the southern part of Denmark, and the judges, the judge and the other judge and myself, we were introduced to all these lovely knitters, and they were so excited. So off went the first program, and what was really interesting was that we had. It was not just like knit a sock. How long does that take? But also knit something to a very dear friend of yours and tell us why your design turns out the way it is. What kind of things do you want to put in this knitting? So we had some very, very touching programs where people were knitting things for their best friend, mother who had died, or husband, and or for the children, whatever expressions they wanted to knit into the projects they did. So it turned out to not just be a program about doing Fair Isle and
knitting techniques,
knitting socks, whatever. Yes, all that. It turned out to be so much more. And what was interesting was that we had so many husbands and men and young children, teenagers coming up to us and saying, "We are watching this program. It is so exciting. Don't vote this one out next time. Please don't. We love her." So there was put some pressure on us, and of course we did have favorites, but we could not show, and we had to be fair. And as the programs progressed, we very, very, very soon sort of picked out, this is definitely her design, even though we did not know whose design it was. They had their own sort of DNA,
yes.
What I mean? So they always did it the same way. So what we had to do when we were judging the finished designs was, of course, to give them feedback in a good way, in a constructive way. not to tear them down and made them feel miserable, but made them, get the energy to next time I'm going to do it better. And I listened to the advice I got from the judges. So I will do it better. And in that way, it was interesting to watch that knitters who thought they were technically very good and they were most comfortable with patterns. They quite soon began to work with their own things and doing their own designs. And after the program had ended, many of them said, I never ever thought that I was able to do what I have been doing in this program, but they were pushed all the time. And another thing is, of course, that they did sign up. So I suppose their mothers and fathers were also watching the program. So they wanted to, stay as long as they could in the program. But
so what was one of the most unusual projects, or what tasks stands out to you as being a really interesting task? And just describe a little bit what happened.
There were many, actually. One of them was, for instance, we went to an art gallery and picked out a few paintings. And then we asked the knitters to knit these paintings just the same, with circles, with squares, and everything that was in the picture. So that was quite challenging. That was one of them. They did well. Then we had a wedding gown. That was for the finalists who had to do it. They were 3 at the end, and we asked them to do a wedding gown. And we on the floor we put leather jackets, towels, tape recording. The tapes, band, ropes from the beach, all kinds of not woolen things. And then they had to add that with wool that they found themselves. We had a very large wool selection they could choose from, and then add all that together and do wedding gown in 6 hours.
Wow!
And that was at the end. They knew exactly how to spend the time right. No small needles, 2.5 needles, big needles, big yarn, things, so they could, get going and finish the project. So by the end of 6 hours, they had all produced a fabulous wedding gown made by the most impossible materials you ever think of. So and they were gorgeous, really. So it was always very hard to pick the best one at the end, because they were the way they developed their skills and ideas doing the programs was so amazing to follow that. And we liked them all. Everyone who was on the show, we loved them. So it was hard to pick the final one at the end. But what was also interesting is that we made 3 programs in a row, and in the second program we noticed that the new knitters, they had watched the first program, so they had been practicing all kinds of techniques, so they were ready, if this assignment came, so they could do fair isle, for instance, or something on the texture, whatever we asked them to do. So they were better prepared, actually. We also had the very moving stories that we had put into the assignments for them. And there are a few programs where we all cry. And I remember there was one program where I said to the television crew, I'm not going to vote anyone out today because all their stories were so moving. How can I pick one out and say your story was the less moving one? So it was very, very
That's
difficult.
so true. That's true. And actually, I want to say something just on that point, because there is, if the viewers want to go and try to find it, there is one episode, because it's all done in Danish, but there's one that's got English subtitles, and I've seen that one. And there was this task where people had to talk about or knit a headband that represented the most difficult part of their life. And I thought this was interesting because at first I thought, this is I wonder how this is going to come across, because sometimes if people are really savvy about being on these shows where they don't want to be voted out, they're very much into milking a situation for as much drama as possible, you know, to be entertaining. And I was and I was hoping that they wouldn't sort of do that they wouldn't sort of fabricate anything. But what came out was so natural and so deeply intimate. I was so impressed. It actually made for real fresh television. You know, they were just they were saying their stories in a very simple, dignified way. It wasn't sort of too dramatic or anything, and it was just incredibly moving. And that's really rare on television.
De her små glimtesten beskriver de børn, der er i mit liv. Josefine og Karoline og Christoffer og Oscar og Ronja og Cirka og en lille en, som ikke kom og blev til noget. Og når man står på sådan en parkeringsplads på et sygehus dagen efter, man har født et barn, der ikke kunne leve, så har man brug for sådan en lille tov at holde fast i, med nogle små rifler på, så man ikke sådan fatter af det. Og det er heldigvis vidt, så man kravler op til den her spiral, som starter nede i bunden og er rigtig hård at kravle op af, og så kravler man hele vejen op igennem spiralen og følger de farver, der er, som giver håb og kærlighed, og så ender man jo herop, når lille Cirka kom. Og det er jo smukt og dejligt. Så spiralen symboliserer, at man heldigvis hele tiden kommer opad og finder lys og liv igen. Og jeg er beriget med 6 dejlige børn. Og det sidste lille barn har jeg i mit hjerte. I forhold til, hvad strik også er, og hvad det i hvert fald er for mig, så har strik hele vejen igennem været en måde at bearbejde ting på. Gode som triste, som dårlige, som dagens almindelige husholdningsopgaver.
So there was 3 series, and you together with the other judge had to keep coming up with new tasks. Was that increasingly difficult? Because I suppose they all had to be new and they still had to be more challenging than the previous task. And on the 3rd series, like you said, that the knitters were getting even more savvy. They'd studied all the previous episodes and probably checked you out as judges and thought, no, she likes this and he likes that, you know, so they were really prepared. You know, how challenging was it for you right at the end of the series?
Well, it was challenging, of course, and the level of had to be harder and harder the longer you got into the program. So of course it was difficult, but we chose not to keep doing techniques. You know, for instance, the one I was telling you about, the picture, the painting that we wanted them to do. We tried to find things like that, assignments which were something that knitters would never knit, you know, but we wanted them to knit, that they could knit circles or whatever so in that sense, there are lots of things that you can knit actually when you start on that route, looking different places. But I believe that 3 programs, that was fine. I don't think that I would have done a 4th one, really, simply because it is true. It is difficult to keep finding new things. And as we get more viewers and new knitters who sign up for the programs, they will be much more, even more prepared than the previous ones. So, and we also saw that in the sense that for the 3rd program, that the first 2 programs, people were very personal about the things and forgetting that there was a camera and everything was going to be broadcasted to the entire Denmark. The 3rd group, the last group we had, it was just like somebody had said from a husband, for instance, you don't talk about this or that. Please don't knit anything that has to do with this incident. So it was harder to get them up in that emotional mood, which also is, of course, part of which is what you exactly described that you liked about the program. It has to be fresh and naive and, you know, honest, spontaneous. Yes. And I think a 4th program would probably have spoiled that. So it was fine with 3 programs, and it was wonderful to do them, really.
It's so exciting. It'd be great if they eventually get English subtitles on all of them. And I think it would be a good thing to do periodically. Anyway, it's been wonderful to be able to hear a little bit of behind the scenes of what went on, because I think a lot of other countries, when they could see it, they thought, oh, how exciting, how amazing. They were very excited to have knitting taken seriously, that there's a TV show on it, like baking. So look, it's been totally wonderful to have you on Fruity Knitting. I'm so grateful that you've been so generous with your time. It's been great to hear about the knitting festival. That sounds so exciting, and I'm going to be there next year. And so thank you very much for spending time with us.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea. It was really a pleasure.
Okay, we'll say goodbye to the audience. Bye.
Bye-bye.